Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Supercars Exchange podcast. As always, I'm joined by Shane. How you going, Shane?
Mate, I'm good as always.
That's good. So, we're going to be doing our mid-season review in this podcast, but first of all, we have a few news stories that have come out during the week. Would you like to take us through those, Shane?
Yeah, well, I thought we could talk about, just they're obviously talking about releasing the calendar coming up for Townsville. Whether they release the full calendar in Townsville, we're not too sure. But one of the big things that they're looking at talking about or looking at changing is reducing the number of rounds. They're looking at perhaps axing a couple of the Victorian rounds, which would be very interesting. They definitely have, like Victoria as a whole, have more rounds than any other state. So definitely that means they'd probably be on the cutting block. They're actually talking about Phillip Island and Winton as the two potentially that might get dropped, and that might upset a few fans because Winton, it's quite popular because it's one of the few rural races that we have. So a lot of the sort of country Victorian, country New South Wales people do make it a bit of a road trip to go down there because you can camp at the track. It's a good atmosphere. But then Phillip Island, it's one of our best circuits. I'm surprised that was on the chopping block.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously the Victoria rounds includes Melbourne, which is the Australian Grand Prix, and they can't really drop that one because that's the only opportunity in the whole year where they have obviously the opportunity to race at that circuit when it's closed due to the F1. And also, they probably don't really want to be missing out on that, basically piggybacking off F1, where there's overseas fans that will see the support categories and go, hey, this is so cool. So they really probably don't want to miss out on that kind of promotion. But like you were saying, Phillip Island going on the chopping block would be it'd be outrage because that produced great racing this year, and it does every year that we go there. It's always guaranteed to have pretty exciting racing. But obviously as well, it's just a little bit difficult because obviously Winton is very contentious with all the people out in country Victoria that can't really make it to Phillip Island. But they can make it to Winton, so it'd be really disappointing for them obviously if they don't have their annual round out in the country there.
Yeah, that's it. For me, I'd much rather keep Phillip Island just because I think it's a better track. Generally, it's better racing, but they don't have the biggest crowds there, surprisingly, because it's a bit of a road trip to get down there. It's definitely a good, probably couple of hours drive to get down there. I think there might be an issue too with accommodation around the place. I'm sure there's plenty, but there's certainly no big hotels or anything like that where to stay at. I think you got a lot of camping grounds around there, which is I think where a lot of people would end up staying. I think Winton for the fans. I think that's a bit more of a for the fans that turn up would be the one to keep, and Phillip Island would then get the chop. But Phillip Island for me produces the better race. So, and the TV ratings is what it's all about. I think so. If they were to keep one, then Phillip Island would probably be the one that they end up keeping. But it looks like both could end up getting the chop.
Yeah, obviously the fourth round that is in Victoria's Sandown, actually in the suburbs of Melbourne. So that they could possibly cut Sandown as well, considering that they're thinking of making the Bend an endurance round.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's and like for me personally, I'd probably rather see. They'll talk about it would be possibly an extra enduro, so it would be a total of four. To me, I think that starts to get a bit too much, especially if they're looking at reducing the number of rounds anyway. Suddenly you've got a third of the championship that's enduros, and I don't think that's the same then. It's taking a bit more away from just that one driver that's going for the championship. So if they were to reduce the number of rounds, then I think, unfortunately, Sandown would have to go. And I'd probably, as much as a historic track it is, that this category's been going there for a long time. But when was the last time we had an absolute cracker of a Sandown 500, or even back when they were just hosting sprint rounds? It's been a while. Like the most memorable moments over the last few years have just been the big crashes.
Yeah.
Which is not overly what you want to remember a race for. So you want to see that really good close racing. In the last few years, we kind of haven't had that.
Especially last year when the was it the Jamie Whincup and Paul Dumbrell, their car was just so much faster than everyone else.
Yeah.
It was just ridiculous. They almost lapped the field. It was so ridiculously ahead. But obviously, I don't think we're going to see that this year for the 500. But yeah, as you were saying, it hasn't produced great racing over the years. I think it's mostly just because if you've got the straight line speed, you've won the race basically, because it's just two massive straights joined together by a few little complex corners. But obviously also at Sandown, there's been safety concerns over the years with that. I think it's turn 8 as he coming off the straight. Been some massive accidents there, as you were saying. But you got to wonder whether Sandown has still got the money to be able to actually afford to host a supercars round, considering not long ago they were talking about how they couldn't really afford, it wasn't profitable for them to be hosting the rounds. And also, the Enduro round, the 500k, not too long ago switched to Phillip Island. So there has been years where Sandown hasn't actually hosted an endurance round.
Yeah, exactly. So we haven't, again, it hasn't always had the mortgage on being the 500 K host. So we've seen it move to Queensland Raceway before, which was not great. That was all about the dollars that the government were kicking in to get that event.
Yeah.
Then it went to Phillip Island because it was arguably better there. I don't know if it was or not. To me, I think the Bend, because it's a nice big facility. It's modern. It's where you would expect a bigger race to be. My only worry is, having only seen one round there last year, it wasn't even that exciting there. It was a bit processional at times. It wasn't a bit of overtaking, but it wasn't a classic, that's for sure. There was talk of whether they would even use like the big monster 7 point something or other K circuit. That's probably a bit too much.
Yeah.
I don't think you'd want to go for that. You'd probably just cost Foxtel / Channel 10 too much money in getting all those extra cameras out there as well. And then obviously you need a lot more volunteers as track marshals around the circuit.
Yeah.
And not only that, for the crowd, you'd be waiting 3 minutes for them to come around and do a lap. So I think that they'd keep the same length circuit that they had last year if they were to put the Enduro there. I think the other big worry is there would be the accommodation around the place. There isn't a lot. They can sort of accommodate for the teams and drivers. Then you've got all the support drivers as well for the support category. So there's a lot of team personnel there. Then you've got the fans, and they can sort of support that in and around the place as it is now. But if it was an Enduro, of course, it's going to attract more people. Can they actually find more places for them? Because not everyone's going to want to camp. You're going to want people that, there's a lot of people are going to want to just stay in hotels as well. So maybe there needs to be a couple of other hotel chains or whatever invest in setting up some cheapish hotels not too far from the circuit, and then that might attract attract people there, and then give more reason to have the Enduro there then.
So moving on to our next bit of news, there has been talk basically since the beginning of the season that Chaz Mostert might be moving to a different team. We don't quite know where he's going to fit in. People were thinking initially slotting in for Fabian Coulthard in Shell V-Power, but now Coulthard has been performing pretty well. We'll get to that later on in the podcast. But yeah, where do you think he's going to fit in?
Well, that's the surprising one. Is just since Darwin, there's been more and more talk that Fabian will retain his seat at DJR, which leaves Chaz without that seat potentially. Like the way the talk's going is that they'll confirm what's happening with Chaz shortly. So it sounds like they're ready to say that we've re-signed him, but that could also mean that we're like, we regret that to inform everyone that we're parting ways with Fabian, and welcome aboard, Chaz. It could be one of those still. We don't know, but it is looking more likely that Fabian's going to keep his seat there. But one of the big contenders that's popped up just in the last couple of weeks, and it's been gathering more momentum, is actually moving to Walkinshaw. And that would be one, as a Ford fan, that I'm going to be pretty annoyed about it. All Ford fans are going to be pretty annoyed about it, but it's such a strange one because that's come out of left field. No one would have considered that would even be a possibility until just recently. But a lot of people are starting to look at it like, potentially he might want it because he's been at Tickford for quite a long time now. He's had some really good results there. Obviously won a Bathurst there way back in 2014. But, results haven't been as good as what some might have thought were going to happen. So they thought, maybe perhaps he wants to re-challenge himself. So by moving to Walkinshaw, that could be sort of considered, his version of the McLaughlin to DJR move. Only issue with that is Walkinshaw, they've been on the steady decline over the past decade, really.
Yeah.
And this year seemed to be going a little bit worse. And they seem, we go into every year, they promise the world and deliver an Atlas, and it's but do you really want to move into that environment? And then it might take you 3 or 4 years to even turn it around, and you've wasted 3 or 4 years of your career.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's such a tough one. Like, obviously, the money might be the one that wins out. Like, if they're prepared to throw a pretty big figure at him, he might take it. There's also whether the Camaro ends up becoming a thing as well. We don't know. That could be what sways him. Even taking the Ford blinkers off, to me, I think it would be a pretty silly move. I'd much rather stay at Tickford, where you've got a competitive car. They're not far off the pace. Like, along with the Penrite team at the moment, are probably equal second fastest on the grid at the moment. And they're not that far away from. It's not like they've got to try and bridge a second gap to Dick Johnson Racing. It's only a couple of tenths, but even with that, Walkinshaw, they're a lot further behind than that. Like they're probably they're the ones that are a good second off the pace compared to Dick Johnson Racing. So, I guess it's what do you want to do? Do you want to move to a team and build them around you and make the team your own, or do you want to stay where you are and at least be competitive now and hope that it gets a bit better?
It'll be interesting to see what he does do, obviously, as it always is during the silly season. But it kind of reminds me of you were saying how it reminds you of McLaughlin to DJR. But he's going to a team that are like bottom of the barrel kind of thing at the moment. Like they're really not anywhere in the championship. And it kind of reminds me of when Lowndes moved to Triple Eight back in 2005, and where everyone doubted him and Triple Eight, but then obviously he's turned that team about very quickly. Whether Mostert has the ability to do that or not is yet to be seen, but he has been sitting pretty comfortably in Tickford since 2011, which was when he was in Super 2 with Tickford. So maybe he's just wanting a change of scene. But yeah, as you were saying, it's quite a bit of a risk.
Well, that's it. And like when you go to like McLaughlin, when he went to DJR, they were a team on the up. So you could see as soon as Roger Penske come on board, 2015, they had the one car. I think Pye ended up getting a podium in New Zealand that year. But you could see that they were starting to improve, especially compared to where they had been in the couple of years before that. And you could, but even when like Lowndes going to Triple Eight, that you could see that Triple Eight were putting in money into that team. As soon as they took over, you could see an improvement in that team. And Lowndes, when he went there in 2005, you could see that he's definitely the team is definitely improving, and then so you want to jump on a team early when they're on the up, rather than jump on a team when they're potentially still on their way down. And that's a strange thing with Walkinshaw. Like they're not sort of a quid. Like they got a couple of big backers, and Walkinshaw, obviously has they're very long racing pedigree with them. obviously Andretti, obviously with American racing, they've been around for decades. And then United Autosport that own McLaren, and even though they're by no means the best team in Formula One, they're still holding their own, and they're still a fairly well-funded team. So to be down in the doldrums like they are at the moment is still a surprise, and it just makes me wonder exactly why that'd be an attractive prospect for Chaz to move to.
I guess we're going to find out how it all unravels after the season ends. So it's going to be.
I think come Bathurst we'll probably know. I think we probably won't find anything until Bathurst, which isn't that far away. But I guess for those that are really wanting to know what's happening with Chaz, you'd rather Bathurst be next weekend rather than still a couple of months away.
Yeah. So for this Townsville round, we're going to be having Caruso subbing in for Richie Stanaway. So the second sub in for Stanaway still has that back issue. Caruso obviously not racing full time this year, unfortunately, despite his having a pretty solid couple years in supercars. But maybe they could we might be looking at him coming in full time for Stanaway, possibly, considering that he hasn't had the best of years. It'll be interesting to compare how well Caruso is able to drive the car.
Yeah, well, that's right, and we'll touch on Stanaway when we get to our report cards shortly, but he's not having a very good season as Stanaway, and unfortunately he had his neck injury that popped up at Winton when he had an accident. Obviously, we hope to see him back sooner rather than later. I think he's only supposed to miss one more round, and then he'll be back after that, so that'll be Queensland Raceway. But yeah, Caruso stepping in. I thought they might have let Chris Pither in the car because he done a really good job in the couple of rounds he had there. His first time out back at Winton, he got their best finish of the season up to that point, and I thought he did all right in Darwin again, but they've put Caruso in the car. I guess for Tickford it works out because he's one of their co-drivers this season. And so I think it works out well for them. They get a bit more seat time for him, and then perhaps it might open the door slowly for Caruso to move in there next year. But I reckon also, like going back to Chaz, if Chaz did vacate that seat at Tickford, I reckon Caruso would be one of the names thrown around to potentially replace him there. And Tickford also, they've always had a history of promoting some of their younger guys up. We've seen it with Cameron Waters, Chaz Mostert's another one of those as well. But I would not be surprised if they had a big run at Todd Hazelwood, who's also off contract at the end of the season. And because Matt Stone Racing, it's a 2-year lease they have on that Jason Bright REC. And I think the rules only say you can only lease that REC for 2 years, and then you have to hand it back. So whether they then have to go purchase that license if they want to, or if it allows them to lease somebody else's, I'm not too sure. But I think at the end of this year, they're either going to have to pack up and move out of supercars or buy a license effectively, and that might leave Hazelwood without a drive, which would be a shame for him. But I reckon if Chaz did move on, I would not be surprised at all if Tickford were to have a massive run at someone like Todd Hazelwood.
Yeah. It's interesting what you're saying about the RCE for Matt Stone Racing. It would be unfortunate if Matt Stone Racing isn't in the team in the championship next year, because the championship's already shrunk quite a bit down to 24 permanent drivers. So down to 23, we're almost looking at F1 numbers then, so it'll be unfortunate if they don't buy a license or come back next year with a different RC, as you were saying. But obviously it's a very expensive sport, and it's only getting more expensive, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's right. They purchased one of, I think it was Jamie Whincup's car from last year, and obviously we've seen that they come out of the blocks with pretty good pace earlier in the season. So they've got decent equipment. There's no doubt about that. what happens to that car if they do end up walking away. Like it is an expensive sport. It's I don't think there's enough top sponsors to fully fund the number of supercars teams we have. Whether they might even merge in with another team, like they might even try and grab one of the Brad Jones spots, or they might even they'll see what there's certainly plenty of those licenses around. I think that they can go up to 27 or 28, so there's certainly no shortage of them going around. It's just who they can get them off, if anyone's prepared to sell one, how much they're prepared to sell it for. I don't think at the moment they're actually worth a lot, because there's a lot of teams that don't have a lot of money at the moment. So I think when the sport's going well, those RECs can be quite expensive. But when it's it's certainly not on the brink, but there are a few teams that are really starting to struggle financially at the moment. So hopefully we can see them on the grid. like Triple Eight apparently, which is, that was the most bizarre one. Like I just heard violins in my head when I heard Roland talking about that Triple Eight or Red Bull Racing
not profitable.
Apparently not profitable. Well, diddums. They're probably still one of the most well-funded teams on the grid.
Yeah.
And like any racing team in the world, like for one, Roland Dane, welcome to motorsport, because every race team will spend every dollar that they get.
Yeah.
That's just how racing works. If someone comes along and says, here's $50, they will find a way to spend it. It's just what they do. Like obviously they would like to keep a bit of money in the kitty left over. Like they you need that fallback in case sponsors pull out, or you ride off a car in an accident and you've got to spend $500,000 repairing it, or building a new one. Of course you need money in the bank, but like they're doing well. Like Holden's, they really are still the only proper official factory team of anyone. Like Ford, yes, they certainly contributed money and engineering towards the Mustang project, but they don't really have a factory team in a sense. Like, and Nissan's obviously pulled out of Kelly Racing as well, so still Red Bull are the only proper Holden or factory back team, and they're the only Holden factory back team. And of course, Red Bull aren't short of a dollar either, so they're going to be contributing a pretty handy amount. I'm fairly sure that they're doing quite nicely, and not to mention they would have two of the highest paid drivers on the grid.
Yeah, exactly.
Potentially as well. So, along with your Chaz Mostert and your Scott McLaughlin, so they'll be in that top 4 or 5 drivers for salaries. I don't know what that would be. You'd think it would have to be up around that $1 million mark, maybe more. I'm not too sure. It's one thing they do quite well at keeping secret of the drivers' salaries, but I would think anywhere between $1 and $2 million a year would be pretty on the money for them.
And then they'd also have their personal sponsors as well. That would bring in quite a bit, and any kind of ads and everything. Right. So
and I think the other bit that they didn't really touch on too much is that the Triple Eight team, or Red Bull Racing, is a separate entity to Triple Eight Race Engineering, which like they manufacture parts. Like they do have their own engine programs for like Irwin Racing, who are a direct customer. Then you got Matt Stone Racing, who have done the same sort of thing, but they also manufacture all the panels for all of the ZB Commodores out there.
Yeah, exactly.
As well. So, and like, I'm not saying that they're selling a pair of front guards for $10,000 or whatever. Like, I don't know how much the guards cost, but if they cost $500 a panel to make, they'll sell it for $600. So they'll still make money. They still do stuff for the Super 2 teams as well. So, I don't think they're getting ready to pack up shop just yet. I think it was, I don't know what it was. Maybe it's been a couple of weeks since he's been in the supercars headlines, so he needed to say something. So so I don't know. I just thought, get the violins out. It can't be that bad for him, surely.
So that just wraps up our news segment. Have you got anything else? Or
I think that was about it for the news. I'm just looking forward to Townsville. That should be a cracker.
Should be nice and warm, hopefully. It's starting to warm up this week finally. It's been freezing for like the last week, but now it's starting to finally warm up here. So
That's
it
it.
should be good.
But Townsville freezing's like 15 at night, isn't it?
Oh, no, it got to 10 the other night.
Oh, wow, almost single figures. That's
Almost
incredible.
single fingers, yeah.
Wow.
It should be really nice for this weekend though. No chance of rain ever, but you know.
No.
So this podcast is actually going to be split in two. So that was our news segment. So the next part will be our mid-season review, just because it's pretty long. So next up will be the next mid-season review in part 2.